Chief Sam Harrison froze mid-sip, his morning coffee forgotten, as 400 pounds of raw muscle and fur crashed through the station's glass doors. The massive black bear didn't charge. It stood upright, amber eyes locked on Sam's, and performed something impossible. It placed both enormous paws together in a desperate, prayer-like gesture. Officer Martinez's chair toppled backward with a metallic crash. Rookie Thompson's hand trembled toward his weapon, but the bear ignored everyone except Sam, dropping something at the chief's boots, a child's torn yellow raincoat, soaked crimson with blood. The silence shattered as Dispatcher Williams screamed. Papers scattered like frightened birds as every officer scrambled for cover, radios crackling with panicked voices. But Sam couldn't move, couldn't breathe, staring into those intelligent eyes that seemed to plead with human understanding. The bear pointed one massive claw toward the mountains, then back at the bloody fabric, whimpering like a wounded dog. In 37 years of law enforcement, Sam had never seen anything like this raw desperation from a wild animal. What had driven this creature to seek human help? And whose blood stained that tiny coat? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The bear's massive frame filled the doorway like a living nightmare. But Sam Harrison had seen enough in his 58 years to recognize desperation when it stared him in the face. 2 weeks from retirement, the weathered police chief had planned to spend his final days processing paperwork and training his replacement. Instead, he found himself face to face with 400 pounds of wild animal that somehow understood the concept of asking for help. Willowbrook, Colorado, wasn't the kind of place where extraordinary things happened. Nestled in the Rocky Mountain foothills with a population barely pushing 3,000, it was the sort of town where everyone knew everyone's business. And the biggest excitement usually involved teenagers tipping over mailboxes. Sam had moved here after Sarah died 3 years ago, seeking peace in the quiet streets and familiar faces. The job as police chief was supposed to be semi-retirement, handling domestic disputes and the occasional drunk and disorderly. The blood on the child's raincoat told him those peaceful days were over. "Chief, what do we do?" Martinez whispered, his service weapon drawn but pointed at the floor. The young officer's hands shook so badly, Sam worried he might accidentally discharge the gun. Sam studied the bear's behavior, remembering his father's lessons from childhood hunting trips. This wasn't aggression. The animal's ears were forward, not flattened. Its posture spoke of urgency, not threat. Most telling were those amber eyes, intelligent and pleading in a way that defied everything Sam thought he knew about wildlife behavior. "Nobody shoots," Sam commanded quietly. "Thompson, get everyone back to the holding cells." "Martinez, radio for animal control, but tell them to hold their position until I say otherwise." The bear tilted its massive head at the sound of Sam's voice, then repeated that impossible gesture, paws pressed together, almost human in its desperation. Sam's throat tightened as he recognized the yellow fabric at his feet. Every parent in Willowbrook knew that Bright Raincoat belonged to Emma Patterson, the 8-year-old who'd gone missing from her grandmother's house yesterday evening. Sam had been the one to take the missing person report from elderly Mrs. Patterson, had seen the terror in her eyes as she described Emma wandering off during what should have been a safe evening walk. The entire town had spent the night searching with flashlights and prayers, combing the familiar streets and calling Emma's name until their voices gave out. Now, this bear was delivering evidence that their worst fears might be true. "Easy, big fella," Sam murmured, slowly crouching to examine the raincoat without touching it. The fabric was definitely Emma's. He recognized the small, heart-shaped patch Mrs. Patterson had sewn over a tear last month, but the blood pattern was wrong for a typical animal attack. Too concentrated, too much in one area. The bear watched Sam's every movement, then padded to the door and looked back expectantly, as if waiting for him to follow. In the distance, Sam could hear sirens approaching. Backup he'd called before this morning took its surreal turn. Everything in his training said, "Wait for support." But those amber eyes held an urgency that suggested Emma Patterson didn't have time for proper procedure. Sam made the decision that would haunt him for weeks to come. Against every protocol in the book, he holstered his weapon and followed the bear outside. The massive animal moved with surprising grace across the parking lot, pausing every few steps to ensure Sam was still behind him. The morning air carried the scent of pine and impending autumn, but underneath it, Sam detected something else: the metallic tang of blood and the acrid smell of diesel fuel. "Chief, where are you going?" Martinez called from the station doorway, but Sam was already climbing into his patrol car. The bear had positioned itself at the edge of the forest, clearly expecting to be followed deeper into the wilderness. Sam's radio crackled to life. "All units, we have reports of a dangerous animal at the police station, requesting immediate backup and animal control." "Dispatch, this is Chief Harrison," Sam responded, starting the engine. "Delay animal control. I'm pursuing a lead in the Patterson missing person case. Chief, protocol requires—" Sam switched off the radio. Protocol had failed Emma Patterson when she disappeared less than 24 hours ago. Protocol would fail her again if he waited for a committee decision while she might be bleeding out somewhere in the mountains. The bear loped ahead on the narrow mountain road, occasionally glancing back to ensure the patrol car was following. Sam had driven these winding paths countless times during search and rescue operations, but never had he felt such an urgent pull toward the remote logging areas that dotted the mountainside. The deeper they traveled into the wilderness, the more his instincts screamed that this was no ordinary animal encounter. 20 minutes into the drive, the bear veered off the main road toward a cluster of industrial equipment that shouldn't have been there. Mountain Timber Industries had permits for logging operations, but not in this sector. This was supposed to be protected watershed land. Sam parked behind a stand of aspens and approached on foot, his hand resting on his service weapon. The scene that greeted him made his blood run cold. Emma's bright purple backpack hung from a broken tree branch 30 feet from where massive logging equipment sat abandoned. Tire tracks gouged the earth in erratic patterns, and scattered across the ground were more of the child's belongings: a homework folder, a half-eaten apple, and most disturbing, a child-sized sneaker with what looked like blood on the sole. The bear approached the makeshift crime scene with careful steps, avoiding the evidence while pointing with one massive paw toward a damaged trail camera mounted on a nearby pine tree. Sam retrieved the camera, his hands shaking as he realized what he might be looking at. Not an animal attack, but an industrial accident that someone had tried very hard to cover up. The camera's memory card was still intact, though the housing showed recent damage from what looked like deliberate vandalism. Sam's portable device revealed footage that made his stomach clench. The timestamp showed yesterday at 6:47 p.m., exactly when Emma had gone missing, according to her grandmother's report. The video showed Emma running through the forest, clearly terrified, glancing over her shoulder at something behind her. Then came the sound of heavy machinery, growing louder as massive logging equipment crashed through the underbrush in pursuit. The camera angle caught the moment Emma stumbled and fell near the ravine, her yellow raincoat snagging on branches as she slid down the embankment. But the most damning evidence came in the final seconds of footage. A man in a hard hat climbed down from the machinery, looked directly at the camera, and deliberately smashed the housing with a crowbar. Sam recognized the face immediately: Rick Blackstone, CEO of Mountain Timber Industries, and a man Sam had met at several town council meetings about environmental protection versus economic development. The bear had been watching Sam view the footage, and now it led him to the edge of the ravine where Emma had fallen. Looking down into the steep, brush-filled decline, Sam could see more disturbed earth and broken vegetation. Someone had been here recently, and from the look of the scene, they had been in a hurry to clean up evidence. Sam's radio crackled despite being turned off. Emergency override from dispatch. Chief Harrison, we have a situation. The Patterson family just identified a body found near Willow Creek. Appears to be a young female, approximately 8 years old. Sam's heart stopped. If they had found Emma's body, then what was the bear trying to show him? He looked into those intelligent amber eyes and saw something that chilled him more than the mountain air. The bear was shaking its massive head as if it understood the radio transmission and disagreed with it. The bear padded to a hidden trail Sam had never noticed in 15 years of mountain patrol, one that led deeper into the restricted logging area. Whatever the truth about Emma Patterson, it lay somewhere ahead in the wilderness, and this extraordinary animal was the only witness willing to lead him to it. Sam checked his weapon, noted his coordinates, and followed the bear into the unknown. The call that shattered Sam's world came through his radio as he followed the bear deeper into the restricted logging area. "Chief, we need you back at the station immediately. The coroner has preliminary findings on the body we found." Sam's hands trembled as he responded. "What kind of findings?" "The remains are older than we thought, Chief. Much older. Dr. Reeves estimates 15 years, maybe more. Dental records are being cross-referenced, but this isn't Emma Patterson." The bear stopped walking and turned to look at Sam with those unnaturally intelligent eyes, as if it had understood every word of the radio transmission. Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. If the body wasn't Emma, then where was she? And what had this bear been trying to tell him all along? "Dispatch, I need you to pull all missing person cases from the last 20 years. Focus on children who disappeared in the mountain areas around logging operations." "Chief, that's going to take hours." "Do it now." Sam's voice carried an authority that brooked no argument. Something much larger than a single missing child case was unfolding, and this bear held the key to understanding it. The animal resumed its steady pace, leading Sam through dense undergrowth toward what appeared to be a natural cave formation hidden behind a curtain of autumn gold aspens. As they approached the opening, Sam noticed something that made his police instincts flare. The cave entrance had been partially obscured by deliberately placed branches and debris, as if someone had tried to hide it. The bear paused at the cave mouth, then carefully moved aside some of the concealing vegetation with one massive paw. What Sam saw inside the dim interior made him reach for his flashlight with shaking hands. The cave wasn't natural. It had been enlarged and modified, with wooden supports and what looked like living quarters carved into the rock. But more disturbing were the collections arranged along makeshift shelves: children's clothing, toys, school backpacks, and personal items that spanned decades. Each item was carefully preserved, almost reverently displayed, as if someone had been creating a memorial to the missing. Sam's flashlight beam illuminated a wooden box near the back of the cave, and inside he found what appeared to be identification documents, newspaper clippings about missing children, and photographs. The dates ranged from 1995 to present day, documenting a pattern of disappearances that had somehow escaped official notice because they occurred in different jurisdictions across 3 counties. But the most shocking discovery came when Sam reached the deepest part of the cave. 3 small forms huddled in the shadows, not human children but bear cubs, probably 3 months old, orphaned and clearly malnourished. The large bear immediately went to them, nuzzling each cub with gentle care that revealed the truth. This wasn't just any bear. This was a mother protecting her young in the only safe place she could find. Sam's radio crackled again. "Chief, you need to hear this. We just got a call from Margaret Chen Harrison. Says she's your adopted daughter, a veterinarian from Denver. She's driving up to help with the bear situation." The name hit Sam like a physical blow. Maggie. His daughter was coming, and she had no idea she was walking into what appeared to be the discovery of a decades-long cover-up involving multiple missing children. Sam had adopted Maggie 15 years ago when she was 10, After her foster family could no longer care for her, she'd become the light of his life after Sarah's death, the only family he had left. "Tell her to stay in Denver," Sam commanded. "This situation is too dangerous." "Too late, Chief. She's already on the road. Says she'll be here in 3 hours." The bear mother seemed to sense Sam's distress and approached him with careful steps. She gently touched his arm with one massive paw, then led him to another section of the cave where more recent items were stored. Sam's heart nearly stopped when he recognized Emma Patterson's homework folder. But more importantly, he found something else, a digital camera hidden behind a rock formation. The camera's memory card contained dozens of photos and videos, all taken by someone who had been documenting illegal logging operations for months. The images showed systematic destruction of protected wilderness areas, but more damning were the videos of workers discovering what appeared to be old burial sites and simply bulldozing over them to hide the evidence. The final video on the camera was dated just 2 days ago. It showed Rick Blackstone himself directing his crew to clean up any loose ends before the new EPA inspection began next week. The audio was clear. "I don't care what you find out there. Bury it deeper and keep working. We've got too much invested to let some tree-hugger investigation shut us down now." Sam realized he was looking at evidence of corporate murder on a massive scale. Mountain Timber Industries hadn't just been covering up industrial accidents, they had been systematically eliminating anyone who discovered their illegal operations, including children who happened to witness their crimes. The bear mother returned to her cubs, but kept watching Sam with those eerily intelligent eyes. She had been collecting evidence, protecting the truth that no one else was willing to preserve. This cave wasn't just a hiding place, it was a monument to every child whose disappearance had been dismissed as animal attacks or simple runaways. Sam's radio erupted with activity. "Chief, we've got multiple units requesting assistance. Rick Blackstone just filed a complaint claiming you're harassing his logging operation. He wants you arrested for trespassing on corporate property." The trap was closing. Blackstone knew Sam was getting close to the truth, and now he was using the legal system to silence the investigation. But Sam had evidence, and more importantly, he had a witness that no one would ever suspect, a mother bear who had been protecting the truth longer than anyone realized. As Sam prepared to leave the cave with the camera and documents, the bear mother approached him one final time. She touched her cubs gently, then looked at Sam with what could only be described as trust. She was asking him to protect her children just as she had tried to protect all the human children whose evidence filled this hidden sanctuary. Sam understood. This was no longer just about Emma Patterson. This was about justice for every child who had vanished into these mountains, and the responsibility now rested with him. Sam's hands shook as he photographed every piece of evidence in the cave, knowing that Rick Blackstone's legal maneuvering meant he had precious little time before this investigation was shut down. The bear mother watched him work, occasionally nudging her cubs closer to the cave entrance as if preparing for an emergency evacuation. Her maternal instincts seemed to understand what Sam was only beginning to grasp. They were all in immediate danger. The drive back to Willowbrook felt like descending into a trap. Sam's radio buzzed with increasingly urgent messages from dispatch, but the tone had changed. Where morning communications had been supportive, now there was an undercurrent of hostility that suggested someone with influence had been making phone calls. "Chief Harrison, Mayor Collins wants to see you immediately upon your return. Also, Rick Blackstone is at the station with his attorney, demanding your arrest for harassment and trespassing." Sam pulled over at a scenic overlook and called the one person he trusted completely. Maggie answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. "Dad, what's going on? I'm getting calls saying you're in some kind of standoff with a dangerous animal." "Maggie, listen to me carefully. Don't come directly to the station when you get to town. Meet me at Dorothy Whitman's place up on Mountain View Road. You remember Dot, the retired teacher who used to send cookies to the station. The lady with all the bird feeders? Dad, you're scaring me. Sam looked back toward the mountains where the bear mother was hiding with her cubs, protecting evidence that powerful people would kill to keep secret. I need your expertise with animals, honey. But more than that, I need someone I can trust absolutely. This case isn't what it appears to be. 2 hours later, Sam sat in Dorothy Whitman's cozy kitchen waiting for Maggie to arrive while explaining the morning's events to the 73-year-old retired teacher. Dot's weathered hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee, but her eyes remained sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. That bear's been around these parts for years, Dot said quietly. Lost her first cubs to a logging accident about 5 years back. I've been leaving food out for her ever since, though most folks think I'm just a crazy old woman feeding raccoons. Sam studied Dot's face, noting something evasive in her expression. You've had direct contact with this bear? Theodore, that's what I call her, though I suppose it should be Theodora. She's smarter than most people give her credit for. Bears remember kindness, Chief Harrison. They also remember cruelty. Before Sam could pursue this line of questioning, Maggie's Honda Civic pulled into Dot's gravel driveway. As Sam felt his heart clench as he watched his adopted daughter climb out of her car, professional veterinary bag in hand. At 25, Maggie had inherited her Asian mother's delicate features but carried herself with the confident stride of someone who'd learned early that life required fighting for what mattered. The reunion was complicated by the presence of a stranger. Dot embraced Maggie with the familiarity of someone who'd known her for years, not someone who'd met her only once or twice at community events. "Margaret, sweetheart, you've grown so beautiful," Dot whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, "just like your mother." Sam felt a chill of confusion. Maggie's adoption records indicated her mother had died in a car accident when she was 6. But Dot was speaking as if she'd known her personally. The moment passed quickly as Maggie, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional display from a virtual stranger, redirected attention to the crisis at hand. "Dad, tell me about this bear. The dispatcher said it brought evidence to the police station?" Sam spread the photographs from the cave across Dot's kitchen table, watching Maggie's expression shift from skepticism to horror as she processed what she was seeing. Her veterinary training made her particularly disturbed by the evidence of systematic wildlife destruction. "This isn't random poaching," Maggie said, examining the photos with professional detachment. "Someone's been using logging equipment to destroy entire ecosystems. The bear behavior you're describing, seeking human help, showing you evidence, it's unprecedented but not impossible. When animals are pushed to the brink of survival, they sometimes develop extraordinary adaptive behaviors." Dot had been quietly studying the photographs, and now she spoke with a voice that carried unexpected authority. "Rick Blackstone's been pressuring landowners to sell for the past 10 years. My property borders the logging area, and he's made some very aggressive offers. When I refused to sell, I started having problems. Vandalism, harassment, mysterious fires that nearly spread to my house." "Why didn't you report it?" Sam asked. "To whom?" "Rick Blackstone serves on the city council and donates heavily to political campaigns. His company employs half the men in this county. Who's going to believe a crazy old woman who talks to animals?" Sam's radio crackled with an emergency tone. "Chief Harrison, we have a situation. Emma Patterson's grandmother just called in. She says she received a phone call from someone claiming to have Emma, demanding ransom money. The caller specifically mentioned that you've been interfering with a logging operation." The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Emma wasn't dead. She was being held hostage to control Sam's investigation. Rick Blackstone had escalated from cover-up to kidnapping, and Sam's decision to follow the bear had put an 8-year-old girl in mortal danger. "Dispatch, I need you to trace that call and coordinate with the FBI kidnapping unit immediately." "Chief, I'm sorry, but Mayor Collins has suspended you pending investigation of misconduct charges." Officer Martinez is now in command of all operations related to the Patterson case. Sam felt the walls closing in. Without official authority, he couldn't access resources needed to save Emma, and Martinez, while well-intentioned, lacked the experience for a complex kidnapping case involving corporate corruption. Maggie had been listening to the radio traffic with growing alarm. "Dad, they can't do this. You're the only one who understands what's really happening." "They can, and they did," Sam replied grimly. "Rick Blackstone has been planning this for months. He's not just covering up past crimes, he's orchestrating new ones to protect his operation." Dot stood up from the kitchen table with surprising determination. "Then we do this without official authority. Margaret, how quickly can you examine Theodore and her cubs to determine their medical needs?" "Dot, I appreciate the support, but civilians can't—" "Chief Harrison," Dot interrupted with schoolteacher authority that made Sam feel like he was 10 years old again. "I've lived in these mountains for 73 years. I know every trail, every cave, every hiding place where a desperate man might stash a kidnapped child. And Theodore trusts me. If you want to save Emma Patterson and stop Rick Blackstone, you're going to need both of us." Sam looked at his daughter, seeing Sarah's stubborn streak reflected in Maggie's determined expression. "This is incredibly dangerous. If Blackstone is willing to kidnap children, he won't hesitate to eliminate adult witnesses. Dad, you taught me that sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks. Besides, I'm a veterinarian. If this bear has been protecting evidence for years, she might be injured or stressed in ways that could affect her behavior. You need professional assessment of her physical and mental state." The decision was made when Sam's personal cell phone rang. The caller ID showed Rick Blackstone's number. "Sam, I think we need to have a conversation." Blackstone's voice was calm, almost friendly. "Seems like you've been exploring areas where you weren't invited. Where's Emma Patterson? The little girl is safe and comfortable. She'll stay that way as long as you remember that some things are better left buried. You're scheduled to retire in 2 weeks anyway." "Why not just let sleeping dogs lie?" "Because those sleeping dogs are dead children, Rick." The line went silent for a long moment. When Blackstone spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. "You always were too righteous for your own good, Sam, just like your wife." The connection to Sarah hit Sam like a physical blow. "What does Sarah have to do with this?" Sarah was asking a lot of inconvenient questions 3 years ago about environmental impact studies. "Did you know she'd been secretly photographing our logging operations? Very dedicated woman, your wife. Too bad about that accident." Sam's vision went red. Sarah's death hadn't been an accident, it had been murder. "You son of a bitch." "Careful, Sam. You wouldn't want little Emma to pay for your lack of professional courtesy. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to announce that your investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing by Mountain Timber Industries. You're going to take early retirement and move somewhere far away. Do this, and Emma goes home to her grandmother tonight. And if I refuse? Then Emma Patterson becomes another tragic animal attack statistic, just like all the others. The bear you've been following makes a very convenient scapegoat. Wild animals are so unpredictable." The line went dead, leaving Sam staring at his phone while Dot and Maggie watched with growing horror. The true scope of Rick Blackstone's criminal enterprise was becoming clear. He hadn't just been covering up accidents. He'd been systematically murdering anyone who threatened his operation, including Sam's own wife. "We're going back to that cave," Sam announced. "If Theodore has been collecting evidence for years, there might be something that directly connects Blackstone to Sarah's death. And if Emma is being held somewhere in the logging area, that bear might be our only hope of tracking her location." Dot moved to an old cabinet and retrieved a hunting rifle that looked well maintained, despite its age. "Harold always said this old Winchester could drop a charging elk at 200 yards. I think it's time to find out if it still shoots straight." Maggie stared at both of them with a mixture of admiration and terror. "Are you two seriously planning to take on a corporate conspiracy with the help of a mother bear and a 73-year-old teacher with a rifle?" Sam checked his service weapon and looked at the two women who'd somehow become his unlikely allies. "Maggie, sometimes the system fails, and ordinary people have to do extraordinary things. The question is, are you with us?" His daughter shouldered her veterinary bag and nodded grimly. "Emma Patterson is 8 years old, Dad." "Of course I'm with you." As they prepared to leave Dot's house, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap that had been years in the making. But Emma Patterson was running out of time, and Theodore the bear was waiting in the mountains with evidence that could either save them all or get them killed. The sun was beginning to set behind the peaks, casting long shadows that seemed to reach toward Willowbrook like grasping fingers. In a few hours, darkness would make their mission even more dangerous, but it might also provide the cover they needed to rescue Emma and expose the truth about Rick Blackstone's crimes. Sam looked back at the town where he'd hoped to spend peaceful retirement years, knowing that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. The journey back to Theodore's cave took on an entirely different character in the late afternoon light. What had been a desperate search for answers that morning now felt like a military operation, with Dot navigating mountain trails she'd known since childhood, while Maggie studied topographical maps and Sam coordinated their approach to avoid Blackstone's security patrols. "There," Dot whispered, pointing toward a cluster of industrial vehicles parked near what should have been pristine wilderness. "Rick's expanded his operation since this morning. Those are the same trucks that have been harassing my property." Sam counted at least 6 vehicles, including what appeared to be a mobile command trailer. Through his binoculars, he could see armed men in tactical gear, far more security than any legitimate logging operation would require. "Maggie, this has escalated beyond corporate malfeasance. Blackstone's brought in professional muscle. Dad, look at the bear." Theodore had emerged from the tree line and was exhibiting behavior that made Maggie's veterinary training kick into high alert. The massive bear was pacing in tight circles, occasionally rearing up on her hind legs to scan the area, then returning to what appeared to be increasingly agitated patrol patterns. "She's exhibiting extreme stress behaviors," Maggie observed. "In captive bears, this kind of repetitive pacing indicates severe psychological distress, usually related to threats against offspring." "The cubs," Sam realized. "Someone's found the cave." Their worst fears were confirmed when they reached Theodore's hideaway. The carefully concealed entrance had been torn open, the wooden supports smashed, and the precious evidence scattered across the forest floor like worthless debris. But more horrifying was what they didn't find. No sign of the 3 bear cubs that had been sheltering in the deepest part of the cave. Theodore approached the destroyed entrance with heartbreaking caution, sniffing the air and making low, mournful sounds that needed no translation. Her cubs were gone, and she knew exactly who had taken them. "Jesus Christ," Sam breathed, examining boot prints in the muddy cave floor. "They took baby bears as leverage. What kind of monster uses infant animals as hostages?" Dot's weathered face had hardened into an expression of pure fury. "The same kind who's been murdering children for 15 years. Rick Blackstone stopped being human a long time ago." Maggie was documenting the destruction with her phone camera when she noticed something the vandals had missed. "Dad, over here?" They didn't find everything. Hidden beneath a loose stone near the back of the cave was a waterproof container holding what appeared to be Sarah's personal research files. Sam's hands trembled as he opened the folder and saw his late wife's handwriting documenting systematic environmental violations spanning 2 decades. But the most damning evidence was a series of photographs Sarah had taken showing Rick Blackstone personally directing the burial of what appeared to be human remains. The timestamps indicated these photos had been taken just 2 days before Sarah's fatal car accident. She knew, Sam whispered. Sarah knew exactly what kind of monster she was dealing with, and she was building a case against him. Theodore had been watching Sam examine his wife's files, and now the bear approached with deliberate steps. She gently touched the photographs with one massive paw, then looked directly into Sam's eyes with an expression that conveyed perfect understanding. This bear had witnessed Sarah's murder and had been trying to bring justice for 3 years. She was there, Dot said quietly. Theodore was there when Sarah died, wasn't she? The bear's response was to lead them to a nearby ridge overlooking the exact stretch of mountain highway where Sarah's car had supposedly skidded off the road during a sudden storm. From this vantage point, they could see fresh tire marks that didn't match the official accident report, along with evidence of recent construction designed to obliterate the original crime scene. They've been covering their tracks, Maggie observed. But why wait 3 years? Sam's radio, which he'd kept on despite his suspension, crackled with an emergency transmission that answered her question. All units, we have confirmation that the EPA investigation team will arrive tomorrow morning for surprise inspections of all Mountain Timber Industries operations. This is not a drill. That's why, Sam realized. Blackstone knows the federal investigation will uncover everything. He's not just eliminating current witnesses, he's trying to erase 15 years of evidence before tomorrow's inspection. Theodore began moving toward a different trail, one that led deeper into the restricted logging area. Her purposeful stride and frequent backward glances made it clear she wanted them to follow, but her destination was taking them directly toward the heart of Blackstone's operation. She knows where Emma is, Dot said with certainty. Bears have incredible spatial memory. If Theodore has been watching this area for years, she knows every building, every hiding place, every route of escape. The approach to Blackstone's main compound required careful coordination. Sam's law enforcement experience proved invaluable as they moved through dense forest, avoiding security cameras and motion sensors that had been installed far beyond the boundaries of any legitimate timber operation. What they discovered made Sam's blood run cold. The logging operation was a facade covering something much more sinister. An illegal waste disposal site where toxic materials were being dumped in violation of every environmental regulation in existence. The logging equipment was actually heavy machinery designed for excavation and burial of hazardous waste from multiple states. "This is why children kept disappearing," Maggie whispered in horror. "Anyone who stumbled onto this operation became a permanent liability." Theodore led them to a prefabricated building that didn't appear on any official site plans. Through a small window, Sam could see Emma Patterson sitting in what appeared to be a makeshift holding cell, unharmed but clearly terrified. More heartbreaking was the sight of Theodore's 3 cubs confined in metal cages nearby. Blackstone was using the baby bears to ensure the mother's cooperation. "How do we get them out without triggering a hostage situation?" Maggie asked. Before Sam could answer, the decision was made for them. Rick Blackstone emerged from the main office building accompanied by 6 armed men, and he was carrying a high-powered rifle fitted with a night scope. "I know you're out there, Sam," Blackstone called into the forest. "You and your animal friends have caused me considerable inconvenience today. Time to clean up this mess permanently." Theodore's response was immediate and terrifying. The massive bear rose to her full height, nearly 8 feet tall, and released a roar that echoed across the entire mountainside. It was a sound of pure maternal fury, a declaration of war from a creature whose children had been threatened. "My God," Dot breathed. "I've never seen her like this." Sam realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, a wild animal making a conscious decision to engage in direct confrontation with humans to protect both her own offspring and a human child. Theodore wasn't just seeking help anymore, she was demanding justice. The bear charged toward the compound with shocking speed, forcing Blackstone's men to scatter for cover. In the confusion, Sam saw their opportunity and signaled Dot and Maggie to approach the holding building from the opposite direction. But Blackstone had anticipated this move. As Theodore engaged his security team in a terrifying battle of survival, Blackstone himself circled around to intercept Sam's rescue attempt. "You should have taken the deal, Sam," Blackstone said, raising his rifle. "Your wife didn't listen either. Look how that worked out for her." The confession Sam had been waiting 3 years to hear came at the worst possible moment. Blackstone had just admitted to murdering Sarah, but Sam was trapped in the open with no cover and no way to reach Emma before Blackstone could kill them all. That's when Dot Whitman proved that retired teachers can be more dangerous than anyone imagines. Her antique Winchester rifle cracked once, and Rick Blackstone's weapon flew from his hands as the bullet shattered the rifle's stock. "I've been shooting deer in these mountains since before you were born, you murdering bastard," Dot called out. "Harold always said I was the better shot." The distraction gave Sam the opening he needed. While Blackstone dove for cover behind a piece of machinery, Sam reached the holding building and began working on the electronic locks that secured Emma's prison. "Are you a policeman?" Emma asked through the reinforced glass, her 8-year-old voice steady despite her obvious fear. "Yes, sweetheart." "I'm Chief Harrison, and I'm here to take you home to your grandmother." "The bear lady's babies are in there." Emma pointed toward the cages holding Theodore's cubs. "The bad men hurt their mommy, and she's been trying to save us all day." Sam's heart broke as he realized this 8-year-old child had spent her captivity worrying about the bear cubs rather than her own safety. In that moment, Emma Patterson became the symbol of everything Sam had sworn to protect when he first pinned on a badge 37 years ago. The electronic locks yielded to Sam's emergency override codes, and within minutes, both Emma and the bear cubs were free. But their escape was complicated by the ongoing battle between Theodore and Blackstone's security team, a confrontation that was rapidly escalating beyond anyone's control. Theodore had been wounded. Sam could see blood matting her dark fur, but she continued fighting with the desperate fury of a mother protecting her young. Blackstone's men were discovering that all their tactical training meant nothing against 400 pounds of enraged maternal instinct. "Dad, we need to get everyone out of here now," Maggie called from where she was helping Emma toward the forest. "This is going to end badly for everyone." But Sam couldn't leave. Not when Theodore was fighting his battle for him, not when justice for Sarah was finally within reach. Rick Blackstone had murdered his wife, kidnapped a child, and destroyed countless lives in pursuit of illegal profits. This ended tonight, one way or another. As if sensing Sam's decision, Theodore broke off her attack on the security team and approached him with obvious exhaustion. The massive bear looked into Sam's eyes one final time, and he understood exactly what she was asking of him. She had brought him the truth. Now it was his responsibility to make sure that truth survived, even if neither of them did. The moment Sam thought victory was within reach, everything collapsed into chaos and heartbreak. Theodore, weakened by gunshot wounds and exhaustion from protecting everyone, made one final heroic charge toward Rick Blackstone's position. The massive bear moved with the last reserves of her strength, determined to end the threat to her cubs and the human child she had sworn to protect. Blackstone, cornered and desperate, raised a backup weapon, a high-caliber hunting rifle he'd retrieved from his vehicle. The shot echoed across the mountainside like thunder, and Theodore stumbled, then fell, her massive body crashing to the forest floor just 20 feet from where Blackstone cowered behind industrial equipment. "No!" Emma screamed, breaking away from Maggie's protective grip to run toward the fallen bear. "Bear lady!" "Bear lady, get up!" Sam's heart shattered as he watched the 8-year-old child kneel beside Theodore's still form, her small hands stroking the bear's massive head while tears streamed down her dirt-stained cheeks. The bear's amber eyes, still intelligent and aware, focused on Emma with what appeared to be gratitude before slowly closing for the final time. Dot Whitman's anguished cry carried across the compound. "You bastard! She was trying to protect us all." The elderly teacher raised her Winchester again, but her hands were shaking too badly to aim properly, grief overwhelming her legendary marksmanship skills. Blackstone emerged from cover with cruel satisfaction, his rifle trained on the group of witnesses who could destroy his empire. Touching scene, really. The brave mama bear dies protecting her cubs. Very Disney. Too bad you'll all be joining her. But Theodore's sacrifice had accomplished more than Blackstone realized. During the final confrontation, Maggie had managed to release the 3 bear cubs from their cages. The terrified babies had immediately run to their fallen mother, and their pitiful cries as they tried to nuzzle Theodore back to consciousness broke something fundamental in everyone who witnessed it. Sam looked at Emma Patterson, still crying over Theodore's body, at the orphaned cubs who would never see their mother again, at Dot Whitman, whose face showed the accumulated grief of watching evil triumph over innocence for too many years. The weight of failure crushed down on him like an avalanche. "This is what happens when people interfere with business," Blackstone announced, his voice carrying the cold satisfaction of a man who believed he'd finally won. "Sarah learned that lesson 3 years ago. Tonight, you all get the same education." That's when Sam noticed something that gave him a flicker of desperate hope. Theodore's final charge had taken her directly past Blackstone's mobile command center, and in her death throes, one massive paw had struck the trailer's communication array. Sparks flew from damaged electronics, and Sam realized the bear's last act had been to destroy Blackstone's ability to coordinate with his security team. The tactical advantage shifted instantly. Blackstone's scattered men were now operating without communication, coordination, or clear command structure. More importantly, Sam's radio was suddenly receiving clear signals from outside the jamming field that had been blocking communications all day. "All units, this is FBI Special Agent Rodriguez. We have authorization for immediate tactical response to the Mountain Timber Industries site. EPA investigators have uncovered evidence of federal crimes, and we are moving in now." Blackstone's face went pale as he realized his time had run out. The federal investigation he'd been trying to prevent had already gathered enough evidence to authorize a full-scale raid. His desperate gambit to silence witnesses had only delayed the inevitable while adding kidnapping and murder charges to his already extensive crimes. "You hear that, Rick?" Sam called out, his voice carrying newfound strength. "It's over. The EPA found everything, didn't they? All that toxic waste you've been burying, all those cover-ups, all those murdered children, the federal government knows everything." "Shut up," Blackstone screamed, his composure finally cracking completely. "I built something here. I created jobs. I supported this community. I made something from nothing. Those tree huggers and government bureaucrats would destroy everything I've worked for." Dot's voice cut through Blackstone's rant with the authority of someone who'd spent decades teaching children the difference between right and wrong. "You didn't build anything, Rick. You destroyed. You took beautiful wild places and turned them into graveyards. You murdered innocent children to protect your profits. That's not building. That's the work of a monster." Emma Patterson, still kneeling beside Theodore's body, looked up at Blackstone with the pure moral clarity that only children possess. "You killed my friend. She was just trying to help me get home to Grandma. Why did you hurt her?" The question hung in the air like an indictment, and for a moment Blackstone seemed to see himself through the eyes of the child he'd terrorized. His rifle wavered, uncertainty replacing the cold confidence he'd displayed moments before. That hesitation cost him everything. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air as federal tactical teams surrounded the compound. Spotlights blazed to life, turning night into harsh daylight and revealing the full scope of Blackstone's criminal empire to dozens of FBI agents and EPA investigators. "Drop your weapon." "Federal agents!" The amplified voice echoed from multiple directions as tactical teams took position throughout the compound. Blackstone looked around at the overwhelming force arrayed against him, then back at the small group of witnesses whose determination had brought his criminal empire crashing down. Theodore's lifeless body lay between them, a final testament to the price of his greed and cruelty. "This isn't over," he snarled. But the fight had gone out of him. Rick Blackstone dropped his rifle and raised his hands in surrender, finally acknowledging that 15 years of murder and environmental destruction had come to an end. As federal agents moved in to secure the scene, Sam knelt beside Emma and Theodore's cubs, trying to comfort children and animals who had lost the bravest protector they would ever know. The bear who had sacrificed everything to bring justice for Sarah, for Emma, and for countless other victims would never see her cubs grow up in the safe forest she had died to protect. But her sacrifice had not been in vain. The truth was finally free, and the monster who had terrorized these mountains for so long was finally facing justice. The only question now was whether any of them could find a way to heal from the trauma of witnessing such profound loss and such extraordinary courage in the same terrible moment. 3 days after Theodore's death, Sam Harrison sat in the FBI field office in Denver, staring at evidence that rewrote everything he thought he knew about his family. Special Agent Rodriguez had just delivered the most shocking revelation in a case already filled with impossible truths, and Sam's world was spinning off its axis for the second time in a week. "Chief Harrison, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you changes the entire dynamic of this investigation," Rodriguez said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Dorothy Whitman isn't just a witness. She's Emma Patterson's great-grandmother, and more importantly, she's your daughter Maggie's biological grandmother." Sam's hands trembled as he opened the folder and found documents that had been hidden for 25 years. Maggie's adoption papers, which he'd never questioned, contained falsified information. Her mother hadn't died in a car accident. She had given birth at 16 and surrendered the baby for adoption because Dot, overwhelmed by grief from her husband's recent death, couldn't care for a great-grandchild. "Dot has been watching over Maggie from a distance for 15 years, Rodriguez continued. "She knew you were a good man, knew you'd give Maggie the stable home she deserved. But she never stopped loving her, and she never stopped protecting her." The revelation explained so much about the past few days. Dot's immediate emotional connection to Maggie, her intimate knowledge of Theodore's behavior patterns, her willingness to risk everything to save Emma Patterson. It all stemmed from a grandmother's fierce protective instinct for family she thought she'd lost forever. But there was more. The genetic testing Rodriguez had ordered revealed that Emma Patterson was also connected to this unlikely family tree. Her grandmother, Margaret Patterson, was Dorothy Whitman's younger sister, making Emma and Maggie cousins and making Dot's desperate fight to save the 8-year-old girl a battle to protect her own great-great-niece. Theodore knew, Sam realized, studying the family connections that the federal investigation had uncovered. Somehow, that bear understood the family relationships better than any of us did. She wasn't just protecting random humans, she was protecting 3 generations of the same family. Agent Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Animals have senses we don't fully understand. Theodore had been watching your family for years, probably recognized similar scents, similar behavioral patterns. When she brought you that bloody raincoat, she was asking one family member to help save another. The emotional weight of this revelation was staggering. Sam thought about the past 3 years, how Dot had always seemed particularly interested in Maggie's welfare, how she'd sent cookies and holiday cards to the police station whenever Maggie visited, how she'd volunteered for every community event where she might catch a glimpse of the young woman she'd given up as a baby. Meanwhile, in the hospital room where Maggie was recovering from her own injuries sustained during the compound raid, she was processing her own life-changing revelations. Emma Patterson sat curled up beside her on the hospital bed, both of them watching the 3 orphaned bear cubs being cared for by a team of wildlife rehabilitation specialists. "Miss Maggie, are we really cousins?" Emma asked, her 8-year-old voice still carrying traces of the trauma she'd endured. "It looks that way, sweetheart," Maggie replied, stroking Emma's hair with gentle affection. "Which means we're family now, and family takes care of each other. Like Theodore took care of us?" Maggie's throat tightened with emotion. "Exactly like Theodore took care of us." The bear cubs had been struggling since their mother's death, refusing to eat and showing signs of severe depression that worried the veterinary team. But something remarkable happened when Emma approached their enclosure. The cubs immediately perked up, recognizing the human child their mother had died protecting. Dr. Sarah Chen, the wildlife rehabilitation specialist, explained the unprecedented situation to Maggie and Emma. "These cubs have imprinted on Emma as a family member. They recognize her scent from the time they spent together in captivity, and they associate her with their mother's protective behavior. It's highly unusual, but they seem to find comfort in her presence." Over the following days, an extraordinary plan emerged. The Colorado Department of Wildlife, in coordination with federal agencies, was establishing a new wildlife preserve on the land where Rick Blackstone's criminal empire had operated. The contaminated areas would undergo extensive environmental remediation, while the pristine forest sections would become a protected sanctuary. Dorothy Whitman, despite her age and recent trauma, would serve as the preserve's first resident naturalist, living in a specially built cabin that would allow her to oversee the rehabilitation and eventual release of Theodore's cubs. The arrangement solved multiple problems. Dot would have financial security through her employment with the state, the cubs would have consistent care from someone they trusted, and the preserve would benefit from Dot's decades of wildlife knowledge. But the most important aspect of this arrangement was the healing it provided for a fractured family. Emma Patterson, whose grandmother was too elderly to provide full-time care, would spend summers and weekends at the preserve with Dot, learning about wildlife conservation while maintaining her connection to Theodore's cubs. Maggie, meanwhile, had accepted a position as the preserve's chief veterinarian, finally able to combine her professional skills with her newfound understanding of the human-animal bond. Sam's role in this new configuration was perhaps the most complex. The federal investigation had not only cleared him of all misconduct charges, but had resulted in offers for high-level positions with both the FBI and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. However, at 58 years old, and after losing the love of his life to corporate greed, Sam found himself drawn to a different path. On a crisp October morning, exactly 2 weeks after Theodore's death, Sam stood beside the bear's grave in what would become the preserve's memorial garden. A simple granite marker read, "Theodore, mother, protector, hero. She chose love over fear." Agent Rodriguez joined him at the gravesite, carrying news that brought both closure and new beginnings. "Rick Blackstone officially pled guilty to all charges yesterday, 15 counts of murder, including your wife, Sarah. He'll spend the rest of his life in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Any word on his accomplices? All arrested, all cooperating. The investigation has expanded to include illegal dumping operations in 6 states. Your bear led us to the biggest environmental crime ring in western United States history. Sam nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. Justice for Sarah, for all the murdered children, and for Theodore had finally been achieved, but the cost had been enormous. The bear who had made it all possible would never see her cubs grow up in the safe forest she had died to protect. "There's something else," Rodriguez continued. "The Department of Justice is offering you a position as special liaison for environmental crimes involving wildlife. It would mean working cases across the western states, helping other communities deal with situations like what happened here." The offer was tempting, but Sam had already made his decision. "I appreciate the consideration, but I'm needed here. This preserve, this family, it's what Sarah would have wanted. It's what Theodore died for." As if summoned by the mention of their mother's name, the three bear cubs emerged from the nearby rehabilitation enclosure, followed closely by Emma Patterson and Dorothy Whitman. The cubs had grown noticeably in the past 2 weeks, their coats filling out, and their play behavior returning as they adapted to their new reality. Emma ran to Sam with the boundless energy of a child who had survived trauma and found safety on the other side. "Chief Sam, look. The babies are getting so big, and Grandma Dot says they're almost ready to start learning how to find food in the forest." Sam lifted Emma into his arms, marveling at how quickly children could heal when surrounded by love and security. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Theodore would be so proud of how brave and strong her babies are." "Just like she'd be proud of all of us," Dot added, approaching with Maggie close behind. At 73, Dot had found new purpose in her role as preserve naturalist, and the responsibility of caring for her extended family had given her a vitality that belied her years. Maggie joined the group at Theodore's gravesite, completing the circle of family that had been forged through tragedy and sealed through sacrifice. "I've been thinking about something," she said quietly. "Theodore brought us all together, but she also taught us something important about what family really means." Sam looked around at this unlikely family, a retired police chief, his adopted daughter, who was actually his step-niece, a 73-year-old teacher who was grandmother to them both, and an 8-year-old girl whose courage had helped expose a decades-long conspiracy. They had been strangers 3 weeks ago, but trauma and love had welded them into something unbreakable. "What did she teach us?" Emma asked, with the curiosity of a child who understood that important lessons often came disguised as stories. Maggie knelt down to Emma's level, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had discovered that truth was more powerful than any lie. "She taught us that family isn't just about who shares your blood. It's about who's willing to fight for you, who's willing to sacrifice for you, and who's willing to love you, even when it's dangerous." As the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in colors that would have made Sarah smile, the family that Theodore had died to protect gathered around her grave to share stories, plans, and dreams for the future. The 3 bear cubs played nearby, their mother's intelligence already evident in their problem-solving abilities and their unusual comfort around humans. The preserve would open to the public in the spring, serving as both a wildlife sanctuary and an educational center dedicated to teaching children about the delicate balance between human progress and environmental protection. But for now, it was simply home to a family that had learned that love, like courage, came in many forms. Some walked on 2 legs, some on 4, but all had hearts that chose to protect rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm, and to build bridges rather than walls. Theodore's legacy would live on in every child who learned to respect wildlife, in every family that discovered the true meaning of sacrifice, and in every person who understood that sometimes the smallest acts of courage could change the world. 6 months later, the Theodore Memorial Wildlife Preserve had become something none of them could have imagined during those dark October days when a desperate bear first crashed through the police station doors. The spring morning air carried the scent of wildflowers and new growth as Sam Harrison stood on the observation deck of the visitor center, watching his transformed family begin another day in their unconventional paradise. Emma Patterson, now 9 years old and officially adopted by Sam after her elderly grandmother's peaceful passing in February, raced across the meadow with the boundless energy of a child who had found her true home. Behind her, 3 adolescent bears lumbered with playful awkwardness, their winter coats shedding to reveal the sleek, powerful animals they were becoming. The bears, now named Hope, Faith, and Theodore Jr., by Emma, had never lost their unusual comfort around humans, though they maintained the wild instincts that would eventually allow their release back to the forest. "Dad, come see what the babies learned," Emma called, using the name that still made Sam's heart swell with pride and purpose. In 6 months, this remarkable child had healed from her trauma and blossomed into a confident, compassionate young girl who seemed to understand wildlife behavior with an intuition that amazed professional naturalists. Dot Whitman emerged from the small cabin that served as both her home and the preserve's research station, her 74-year-old frame moving with surprising spryness as she carried a clipboard full of behavioral observations. "Sam, you need to see this. These cubs are demonstrating problem-solving abilities that exceed anything documented in wild bear populations." The preserve had attracted attention from wildlife researchers across North America, all fascinated by the unprecedented intelligence displayed by Theodore's offspring. Dr. Sarah Chen had published preliminary findings suggesting that the cubs' extended exposure to human problem-solving during their mother's evidence-gathering activities had somehow enhanced their cognitive development. Maggie approached from the veterinary clinic that occupied the preserve's eastern wing, her professional confidence now enhanced by 6 months of hands-on experience with wildlife rehabilitation. "The morning medical checks are complete," she reported. "All 3 cubs are in perfect health, and their social behaviors continue to be remarkably sophisticated." The family had settled into routines that would have seemed impossible during those terrible days in October. Emma attended the local elementary school during the week, but spent every afternoon at the preserve, helping with educational programs that brought hundreds of children each month to learn about wildlife conservation. Her natural ability to communicate complex ecological concepts in terms other children could understand had made her an invaluable part of the preserve's mission. Dot had found new purpose as the preserve's chief naturalist, her decades of teaching experience perfectly suited to developing environmental education programs. But more importantly, she had finally been able to openly embrace her role as grandmother and great-grandmother to the family she thought she'd lost forever. Sam had officially retired from law enforcement but found his days busier than ever as the preserve's director and primary liaison with federal agencies. The success of the Theodore Memorial Preserve had led to invitations to consult on similar projects across the western United States, but Sam had learned to say no to opportunities that would take him away from his family for extended periods. "There's something we need to discuss," Maggie said, her tone carrying the weight of important news. "I got a call from Dr. Rodriguez at the CDC this morning. They want to study the cubs' behavioral development as part of a larger research project on animal intelligence and environmental adaptation." The proposal represented both an honor and a challenge. The research could provide valuable insights into wildlife conservation and rehabilitation techniques, but it would also mean increased scrutiny and potential disruption of the family's peaceful life. Emma overheard the conversation and approached with the directness that children brought to complex issues. "Will the research people take the babies away from us?" "No, sweetheart," Sam assured her, kneeling down to her level. Any research would happen right here at the preserve with our family involved in every decision. We wouldn't let anyone separate us from Hope, Faith, and Theodore Jr. The mention of the bears' names brought a bittersweet reminder of the extraordinary animal whose sacrifice had made their current happiness possible. Theodore's grave in the memorial garden had become a pilgrimage site for visitors from around the world, all drawn by the story of a mother bear who chose to protect human children at the cost of her own life. But Theodore's legacy extended far beyond the preserve's boundaries. The investigation triggered by her desperate plea for help had resulted in the prosecution of environmental crimes across 6 states, the cleanup of dozens of illegal waste sites, and the implementation of new federal protections for wilderness areas. Rick Blackstone's criminal empire had been completely dismantled, with the recovered assets used to fund environmental restoration projects throughout the Rocky Mountain region. "I've been thinking about something," Dot said, settling into one of the rocking chairs on the visitor center's porch. "We should tell Emma the whole truth about how we're all connected. She's old enough now to understand the family relationships, and she deserves to know her full story." The conversation Sam had been dreading and anticipating for months had finally arrived. Emma knew she was adopted and understood that Dot was somehow family. But the complete truth about the genetic connections that bound them all together was more complex than most 9-year-olds could easily process. "Emma, come sit with us," Sam called gently. "There are some family stories we want to share with you." Over the next hour, with the spring sunshine warming the porch and the sounds of wildlife creating a peaceful backdrop, they told Emma the full truth about her biological connections to Maggie and Dot, about the chain of adoptions and separations that had scattered their family across decades, and about how Theodore had somehow understood these connections better than the humans involved. Emma listened with the serious attention she gave to all important information, asking thoughtful questions and processing the complex relationships with remarkable maturity. When they finished, she was quiet for several minutes, watching the 3 bear cubs play in the meadow below. "So Theodore knew we were all family before we did?" she finally asked. "It appears that way," Maggie confirmed. "Bears have senses and instincts we don't fully understand." She seemed to recognize that we belong together. Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Animals are smarter about love than people sometimes. They don't make it complicated with rules and paperwork and stuff." The wisdom in that simple observation struck all 3 adults simultaneously. In the space of 6 months, this remarkable child had learned lessons about family, love, and loyalty that many people never discovered in a lifetime. As the afternoon progressed toward evening, the preserve's daily routines continued with the comfortable rhythm of a life built around mutual care and shared purpose. The bear cubs returned to their enclosure for the night, though they would soon be ready for the gradual transition to independent forest life. Emma completed her homework at the kitchen table while Dot prepared dinner and Maggie updated medical records for the various wildlife patients currently in rehabilitation. Sam stepped outside to make his evening phone call to Agent Rodriguez, a weekly check-in that had evolved from professional necessity to genuine friendship. The federal investigation had concluded, but Rodriguez continued to consult with Sam on environmental crimes cases across the country. "How's the family tonight?" Rodriguez asked, a question that had become part of their regular ritual. "Growing stronger every day," Sam replied, watching through the kitchen window as Emma helped Dot set the table while Maggie stirred something that smelled like Sarah's favorite soup recipe. "I think Theodore would be proud of what we've built here." "Any regrets about turning down the federal position?" Sam considered the question seriously before answering. 6 months ago, the opportunity to work high-profile environmental crimes cases had seemed like the perfect way to honor Sarah's memory and Theodore's sacrifice. But watching his family heal and grow together had taught him that some victories were measured not in cases solved or criminals prosecuted, but in children who grew up feeling safe and loved. No regrets, Sam said firmly. Sometimes the most important work happens in one small place, with one small family, making sure that love and courage get passed down to the next generation. As the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the preserve in golden light that made everything look touched by magic, Sam joined his family for dinner around the table that had become the center of their world. Emma said grace with the unself-conscious spirituality of a child who had witnessed miracles, thanking God for family, for the bear babies, for Dot's cooking, and for Theodore, who was watching over them all from bear heaven. The future stretched ahead with promise and possibility, built on the foundation of sacrifice, love, and the understanding that family, like courage, came in many forms, but always chose protection over destruction, healing over harm, and hope over despair. Dear friends, if you've followed Theodore's incredible journey with us, you know that sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in our deepest sorrows. At 58, Sam Harrison thought his story was ending, a widowed police chief counting down to lonely retirement. But a desperate bear's plea for help revealed something profound. Family isn't just blood. It's the bonds we choose to honor when everything seems lost. Like many of you watching your own families scatter across the country, Sam discovered that love has a way of bringing us home to each other, even when we least expect it. Dorothy, at 73, found purpose caring for orphaned bear cubs while secretly nurturing the granddaughter she thought she'd lost forever. Their story reminds us that our chapters of greatest meaning often begin when we think the book is closing. Whether you're facing retirement, empty nest syndrome, or the fear that your best years are behind you, remember Theodore's lesson. Courage isn't about being fearless, it's about choosing love when love seems impossible. The family you create through kindness and sacrifice can be even stronger than the one you were born into. What unexpected family has come into your life during difficult times? Have you ever witnessed an act of animal intelligence that changed your perspective on loyalty and love? Share your stories below. We'd love to hear how life surprised you with second chances.